Welcome to Natural Habitat Adventures Daily Dose of Nature. I'm your host, Sunny Vanderstar. Today's topic is how ancient Aztec agriculture thrived in Mexico City, and it will be presented by our fabulous natural expedition leader, Melissa Silva. Melissa, thank you so much for being here today and for bringing us another wonderful topic. Let's go ahead and dive in.
Thank you, Sunny. Thank you. Very happy to be here with all of you. And yeah, sharing another very cool feature of Mexico, in this case of Mexico City, something I think is very important and interesting. So this is just um, the tip of the iceberg of what you can learn about this magical place named Xochimilco, and how it has been thriving since ancient times, since the Mexica times, and a little bit before. So let's start from the beginning, like why we have this area here, why we have these conditions to create this type of agriculture. In the central part of Mexico, we have, in terms of hydrology and rivers and lakes, a basin, the what is now the Mexico Valley, where we have the city of Mexico. It's called the Mexico the Basin, and it's formed of five main sierras or mountain ranges around this area. So on this map, all the green is this basin that I'm talking about. The red lines are all the state divisions, and this area here where I'm showing with the arrow of my mouse, it's Mexico City. Only this area. So most of the state of the city is inside the Mexico Basin, but only the northern part is what gets what we call endorheic lakes. So in this area, we still have several rivers. We used to have several springs, and the snow that melted from the mountain tips around the basin, all of those were feeding the lakes inside this valley. Um, the extension back on the day, some thousands of years of these lakes, was about the same extension. I don't know if you have heard of, seen or been in Chapala Lake in Jalisco State, nearby Ajijic town. It's a very popular destination for retired citizens from the U.S. So the size of this area of the lakes that were on the Mexico Basin, some 3,000 years, 2,000 years ago, was the same size as this Chapala Lake, that is the largest lake that we have nowadays in Mexico. So within those lakes, we had several islands and islets, and specifically the biggest of them all, the Texcoco Lake and adjacent, um, is where we had the one of the most important Mexican or Mesoamerican civilizations, the Aztecs, the Mexicas. Uh, this lake was actually conformed of five different lakes that were together or joined together during the rainy season. So when we had our dry season, which is usually in winter time, we had five different lakes. Here I'm dividing them a little bit with these black lines. We had five different lakes, being the largest of them all, the Lake Texcoco, which is the one in the central part, which eventually, when the Aztecs settled there, they built a causeway, a path for the people to cross from one side to the other, but also to keep the waters separated. And they named their area where Tenochtitlan was built the Mexico Lake. So some people say there are five lakes, there were five lakes, or there were six. It depends on which time we're talking about or which source we are reading. Then the rest of the lakes, the ones that were on the southern part of the basin, were the Xochimilco Lake and the Chalco. lake. So eventually we'll talk about Xochimilco. Let me just talk a little bit about the characteristics of this. In the northern area of this system of lakes, we used to have more like brackish water. Despite being like so far of the ocean, all of the minerals and the salts that came in to this basin uh, from the mountains around, from the sierras, were in higher concentrations on these areas here, on the Zumpango, Xaltocan, and Texcoco lakes, which are like the central and northern lakes. Then on the southern part, since these were in geological times newer lakes, they didn't have enough time to get so much salts and so much minerals dissolved in their water, so they still were considered more like freshwater lakes. So that's why here in the Tenochtitlan area we find the division that the Aztecs did to keep like the more salty water, like the brackish water, separated from the fresh waters of the Tenochtitlan Island and surrounding areas. So I like this map very much because it's very informative. We can see the marshes with this dotted area on the sides of the lakes. And then we can see the chinampas, that I will go and speak about that in a moment, which is this ancient agricultural system that was so important. So, well, let me just go a little bit deeper on the Tenochtitlan Island because it's important later on to understand the importance of the Xochimilco area and the chinampas, the agricultural system there. So Tenochtitlan was built in one of these islets. The legend says that there was a group of people coming from this mythological, almost real place named Chicomostok, and they were just traveling for years until one of their gods gave the priest the sign to settle, and the sign was an eagle devouring a snake on top of a prickly pear. And it happens that they found that in one of the islets of the Texcoco Lake. So they started building the city from that islet on and on around the place until they had this huge complex. It was once considered Mexican Venice because it had canals all in between the places to communicate each side of the town. On the biggest times, on the wealthiest times of the Aztecs, Tenochtitlan, only the city, the island, was inhabited by 200,000 more or less inhabitants, and it was actually bigger or more populated than other cities in Europe on the same time. For example, Madrid or London, they had less inhabitants than the Tenochtitlan Island back on those days. And they were very good builders because they were able to connect the island with other towns, as you can see on this representation, through some calzadas, we call them causeways. So they had like this system or engineering process of building in the water, on top of the water, with the water. So they were very advanced. And uh, one of the towns that they wanted to connect Tenochtitlan with was Xochimilco. Back on the day was the same name, Xochimilco. And this was not such an independent town, but it still had certain autonomy. So eventually, of course, we had the Spanish conquer, and then Xochimilco becomes one. It was like one hacienda. I don't know if you're familiar with the haciendas, like a feud back on from the Europe for the Spaniards. So they actually were using the same agricultural system that the ancient Aztecs were using. So Eventually, of course, we have a mix of um, cultures, a mix of knowledgement. So we had both like the land agriculture and then this um, water, or I think it's called permaculture. So it's like in the water, using the water resources, but not wasting them. So well, that bring us to the modern day Xochimilco. The meaning of the name is where the flowers grow, because well, since the ancient times, Xochimilco was the place where Aztecs used to have all of their crops. The the oldest settlement, the oldest archaeological is the registers there date back to at least 900 year of the common era. So that is like 1,200 years ago, more or less, is when the archaeologists find some hieroglyphs or some old chinampa structures in the area. So Xochimilco was, as I mentioned, on that specific time independent, but by the 10,000 of the common era, so that is like 10 is the I'm sorry 1,000 years ago, uh, Xochimilco is now part of the Aztec Empire. So just something that we need to keep in mind is that the Aztec Empire is pretty much a new empire, or one of the newest ones of Mesoamerica. Uh, let's say it started in the 500 of the Common Era, and then on the maximum power and development was only until the maybe 1300 of the Common Era. So we have the Spanish conquerors coming on the 1500s. So that gives us just like 300 years more or less of like Aztec dominion on this area. So that's why these dates are so close to ours. So in those pre-Hispanic times and the times of when we were the New Spain, we were more like a not such a colony, but a viceroy, un virreinato. Xochimilco was always very, very important. It used to be one of the most productive areas in the place of Mesoamerica. The production was so good and so high that the harvests, only the harvest from Xochimilco, were able to feed all the inhabitants of Tenochtitlan. So if you remember, 200,000 people of Tenochtitlan and the towns around there were fed by the crops from Xochimilco area. Just for you to imagine like how much food they were producing. Eventually, as I mentioned, when we have the Spanish coming, uh, things change a little bit in terms of where they get their food source resources, but still the production was so high that the Spanish were able to export food, to take food from Xochimilco area to Spain. So, well, just imagine the size of this agricultural system on those days. Coming closer to our century, during the 19th, 20th century, still there was a huge production of food, but it was also important in terms of communication. It was a way of communication between the south part of what is now Mexico City to the central part of the city that has always been like on the same area of the Zócalo and this place in downtown Mexico. So we still had a lot of channels, a lot of canals, big the wide canals, deeper than others, and those were connecting the southern part of the lakes. If you remember, I mentioned Chalco and Xochimilco Lake. Let me show you again the map. Lake Chalco down here, Lake Xochimilco, and downtown Mexico City is settled on where the old Tenochtitlan was. So if you see this map on the right, in the 19th century, people that was living here in Chalco area were taking these steamboats, like huge hundred of passenger steamboats, to central Mexico, all around this place. So just for you to have the dimension of the importance of this area. For example, a couple of our most famous presidents, Benito Juarez and Porfirio Diaz, in the mid 1800s, they were preceding or they were in the opening of the big steamboats. This is one of the signs. Here you can see on the corner, is the right corner of the image, bottom right, is the inauguración, is the opening of these vapores, they call it, the steamboats. So it was quite a big thing. It was very important in terms of economy. Later on, they stopped being in use because we had the trains that were faster and they were moving more people more efficiently. But then there was, I don't know exactly why they decided that, but there was this um, uh, idea of the government on the early 1900s, more or less after our revolution, in between our revolution and a little bit after 1900s, in which the government decided to dry the channels, to dry the canals, to dry these lakes that were still around the place. Um, I'm pretty sure, and most of the information that I heard, it was in behalf of development, in behalf of the growth of the city, in terms of building more houses for the people or having more places to plant, like the common land agriculture. So well, nowadays we have just some remnants of those, but let's continue on the importance of Xochimilco during the 19th and 20th century. It was considered the barn of Mexico City. The Xochimilco in some newspapers of the time was called El Granero de la Ciudad, the barn, because well, they were supplying the food for most of the people in central Mexico, in Mexico City, because of the high efficiency of the lands. They could harvest up to 5 crops per year. And you name it, it was veggies. I will show you in a moment some of the harvest that we can have here, some of the crops. But well, any type of veggies that were available here. And then fish also on the canals and the natural channels. There were lots of fish that were able also to be consumed. So well, it was something very important for those specific years of excuse me. So a very young Mexico actually, just coming out from an area of a time of a lot of wars, the revolution and others. So well, it was a very important area back then for Mexico City. So what happens now, 21st century, is just the remnant of the ancient lake, unfortunately. Nevertheless, this is still very important. Now it is declared, some areas of this is declared an ecological park. All of it is a protected area in some higher or lesser degree. It's very popular, of course, because of the trajineras, the chinampas that I will mention in a moment. And believe it or not, it's still the main food supply to Mexico City. So we still rely, the ones that the people that live here in Mexico City, we still rely in Xochimilco for most of our fresh food, our fresh vegetables and well, other plants, edible plants that we get from there. So well, this is still very important. So it's important. I consider it's important to share what is Xochimilco, because sometimes when you hear or you see news about Xochimilco, is more than anything like the party boats, like going there for the fiesta and a little bit of the ecology. So this is and the history. So this is something that I consider is very important. So um, let me just get some very wide representative festivities of the area. So Chimilco actually has around 400 and a little bit more festivities. So they at least have one festivity for each year, if each day of the year, more than 400 festivities. Of course, some of them are celebrated in different neighborhoods within the borough, and they are celebrated at the same time. One of the most beautiful that you can see here is the Day of the Dead. I actually have a webinar explaining deeper on how we celebrate the Day of the Dead and the meaning and everything. But in Xochimilco, it takes a different flavor because, of course, the environment where we are. There are nocturnal festivities like theater plays. You can go on the boats, on the trajineras at night, and the people has like candles and everything set up for the ambience of Day of the Dead. So it's a very nice celebration in that specific place. Another celebration or festivity that they have is called La Flor Más Hermosa del Ejido, which a translation would be the most beautiful flower of the land, of the area. And this festivity is a very pretty one. I consider it's a very nice one because the main goal that the people in charge mentioned to have is to take the natural beauty of the woman of the women from the area. The mestizo woman that is the mix of the indigenous and the Spanish heritage is the one that is celebrated there. It's not like the typical beauty contest that we can find in other places. Here, the people that is participating, either musicians, dancers, the same ladies that are in the contest, those are from Xochimilco area, and they need to have at least some generational background from the area. So, for example, I'm not from from Xochimilco. I wouldn't be eligible to participate to be a contestant because I'm not from the place. Then another thing that they have to know is at least some phrases in their native language, in Nahuatl. Some of the ladies there, they have their mother tongue as being Nahuatl and the second language being Spanish. So it's a kind of like a competition of culture, tradition, heritage, and then they have to pick a flower, and then they give the characteristics of the flower, why they decided to pick that flower, how they like relate to that. And it's a very nice contest that I wanted to mention. Um, and then another one that I find to be very interesting. Mexico is a mostly a Catholic country, and but within the Catholicism we have a lot of syncretism, which is like this mix of the pre-Hispanic beliefs and the Catholic beliefs, and here is more notorious than on any other. For example, Day of the Dead is a very good example of that, but that is more like spread all around Mexico. But this specific festivity, the Niñopan festivity, is exclusive from Xochimilco, Niñopan. So it has at least 400 years of celebration, and the idea of this is to have a representation of the baby Jesus dressed up like with these very luxurious clothes, and each week, each couple of weeks, the image goes from one house to another. The family hosting the image must offer some prayer, some like a mass, but in their house. And what I read is this is something so special and so important for the Xochimilco people that you can wait up to 25 years to host the image of the Niñopan. So there are dances, there are, of course, like these stands of food, street food on the area where the Niñopan is. So it's quite a big celebration, and the most important day for the image is February the 2nd, that I think is Candle Mass Day. So, well, it's another festivity that is also very, very interesting to know about. Another very interesting thing is the trajineras. Is this the trajineras used to be these big boats where we let me show you the photo again, where we had the harvest taken to, in this case of the photo, to Mexico City, to other big towns. But eventually, by the early no by the early 1900s, the rich people of Mexico City came to Xochimilco to be on the boat just as for the day, for fun. And then eventually, local people of Xochimilco realized that this was, well, quite a good business. And now we have like all this colorful setup area for boats. I mean, setup boats for the area of Xochimilco. So the trajineras is basically a must, and is what I mentioned. Like when you think about Xochimilco, you think about trajineras. Of course, uh, the importance in terms of ecology and biodiversity is so big that I should have like one specific webinar about that only. What I want to do right now is just to mention that it has the status of World Heritage from the UNESCO. So the amount of biodiversity that we have there, the importance in terms of ecological services that it provides, not only for the local area but for the whole city around, it's huge. So instead of giving you like a list of all the hundreds of species that we have, there are, for example, more than 130 species of birds that are all year round in Xochimilco. On winter time that we have the migratory birds, we add to those around another 100. So just for you to picture the importance. For detailed information about the species on the place, go to this website, mexico.inaturalist.org, and you search Xochimilco right there, and you have a list of the different areas, the park or the chinampas areas. Very, very interesting. So the chinampas. Now let's talk about the agricultural system. Now you know like all the background of why we have this or how we have this on the area. The chinampa, the meaning of chinampa is also an Nahuatl word, just like Xochimilco, and it's in defense of reeds. You will see in a moment why it is called in defense of reeds. So the chinampa is basically an artificial island. This artificial island, of course, man-made, with sticks, with the reeds, grass trunks, like any vegetation that is around the place, but also the mud from the lake bottom, from the lake floor. So the deep rise of the food that the Nahuatecas, the Xochimilca people used to have, they were setting also all of those organic debris, and they were just compacting the land. So according to some researchers, not in Xochimilco but in Mesoamerica, the chinampas or the system has been in use for at least 3,000 years. So that dates back just like way before Tenochtitlan was in the area, way before Xochimilco area was a town. Remember, they were in very modern times a settlement. So, well, this chinampas is a very ancient technology from the Mesoamerican people in here. Um, the chinampas these islands are most of the times not very wide. They are more like narrow and they can be long. So you can see here the data I wrote, more or less 3 meter wide up to 12 meter, no more than that, and they can be from 6 to 20 meter long, but they can also be up to 90 meter long. So if you notice, they are pretty narrow, and they can be very long, and that is because you need to have like all of the area wet or moist from the canals around. So if you have, of course, a very wide chinampa that they existed, the central part of the land will be drier than the corners, than the outside. Then the canals that were left in between the chinampas, they were in different sizes. They could vary from 2 meters, 1 meter to 4 meter wide, a little bit longer in some areas. It depends on, I will go in a moment to that, if they are like primary or secondary canals for different uses. So how they build the chinampas? If this, just imagine these people, they didn't use they knew the wheel, but they didn't really use the wheel for like some purpose more than fun, actually. Uh, they didn't have cattle or horses or big mammals to help them to move the dirt. So they were just using their human power, the human strength. They were taking the sediment from the shore of the lake and using it in one area right here to create a future chinampa, to fill the area of the future chinampa. This sediment of the lake, this mud, is so rich in nutrients that basically it can support like this 5 harvests on the year and more. So that's what they were doing. They were just like taking the mud from the bottom of the lake and then using it to put it on top and start the creation of the chinampa. Once they had like the area where they wanted to start the construction of the chinampas, they had some stakes, some trunks of live plants, specifically a species of willow, but it could be like any type of big trunk that was still able to bloom again, to grow again. They were compacting, they were just like pressing the central part in between the canals with the sediment, and they were making some layers on that. And those layers were very important because they need to be porous to let the water be in all the areas. If you remember, I mentioned they had to be a little bit narrower rather than wide, because you need to have like the whole area covered with moist or wet. So at the very beginning, as I mentioned, they used to have like this mud, and then as they decided where to set like the chinampa, they were weaving reeds and setting grass on top of that, and then more reeds waved, and then more grass, and then they start adding the layers of mud and dirt and mud and dirt. And with those live stakes that I mentioned, we had like these big trees making like a definition, like the fence, a live fence for the chinampa. So that was pretty much like all the engineer after the chinampa. The chinampa was able to produce, to give harvest from the very first year of construction. Excuse me. At the beginning, they of course were planting like these crops that needed a lot of light. Eventually, when we had the willows, the aguejotes in Nahuatl, growing up, the crops needed a little bit less sun. So you can have like in some areas shorter aguejotes, in some other areas like denser forest. For it depends on what the crops, what were the crops that they wanted to have. Um, a chinampa, we can consider like mature chinampas or young chinampas depending on how deep on the water they are. If they are settled on the bottom, if they are settled on the bottom of the lake, like this chinampa here on the right side of the image, this is considered like a mature chinampa. So you can see that you have the willows, the aguejotes that are already very big, and then you have all the crops, and then you have other chinampas on the side that in this diagram you can see they are not fully, how can I say that, like that is the depth into the lake. As you notice, we still have a lot of water under the chinampa area. So, well, like a young chinampa, a middle-aged chinampa, and a mature chinampa, and they could coexist at the same time. So, if you needed more land to harvest, to plant any other the crop, you were able to add a new area to your land or to your water area in this case. So the aguejote, the willow, why it is so important? You can see in this area of this is like a nowadays we can see more huge chinampas rather than the small ones back on the day, because well now we have some other technology like the pumps to water the inside parts of the chinampa. But the aguejotes were also very important for that matter for watering the crops because they have this type of roots. If you notice, this is like a very spongy root. So it not only takes the water, but it keeps the water. So it's going to take the water in for its own use, for the willow use, but it's also going to keep the water there as an extra reservoir for other plants that can be around the place. So the aguejote was actually considered in a certain level of sacred for the ancient Aztecs, the Xochimilcans, and the Nahua people in the central part of Mexico, because of the shape that they have. If you notice, they are pretty much like straight up to the sky, to the heavens. So they thought that they were connecting the land of the living people, the land of the humans, with the heavens of the gods, with the area where the gods were. But it also was connecting the underworld with this system of roots as well. And it was giving like extra support to the human world, uh, in this case, because they were seeing the use of the willows in the chinampas. So remember that the Aztecs and all these ancient Mesoamerican cultures had like a very spiritual way of seeing life here in the world. We have now that we are these modern humans, we have forgot a little bit about that. But just think about how they lived in this area with that cosmology, with that way of thinking. So everything was connected. In this case, the aguejote, that is this huge tree giving support to what they need to survive, was considered a sacred tree. And besides that, it was used and is still used to treat some ache, for example, headaches or stomach aches in traditional medicine on these areas. They are still used as a tea for those treatments. So while I was mentioning about the Chinampa the system and the channels and the width of the Chinampas, so on this diagram, um, you can see, well, the green areas, of course, are the chinampas, and the different blue colors are the different canal system. So the primary canal was, of course, for the big boats, for the trajineras or the big chinampas or more chinampas at once, to is the carry. Well, nowadays you can carry even uh, a car, but you can carry like all the trunks to build a house, or all the group of people that was going to work in one of the big chinampas. So, or all the load of crops of harvest that you need to move from Xochimilco to other areas to for the market, for example. So those would be like the primary is the canals. From those, you had the secondary canals going all around the place for the smaller boats, for the we call them either chalupas or pretty much like canoes. So those secondary areas, in some cases, were closed, not closed, but they were delimited from or divided from the primary is the road is canal from with fences of reeds, made of fences of reeds. So if you remember the name of Chinampa, the fences, the reeds, that's why they also have this name. These channels, the secondary channels or canals, were and are very important for the conservation of local species in terms of fish, amphibians, reptiles, and of course birds that are, well, moving all around the place. But the ones that can just stay in like some areas are found in these secondary canals mostly. And bueno, eventually there's a webinar coming about the axolotl, the salamander from Xochimilco. And there is where we used to have the salamanders in natural conditions. On the secondary is the canals of the Chinampa system. And then we have another canal that is the tertiary canal. And that one basically was just to keep the water flowing, to keep they were so narrow that you could not get in there with the canoe, and they were a little bit more muddy, so you were not like swimming around the place. And those were only to keep like these big chinampas moist from on the inside of the chinampa. So we had like this complex uh, web of weaving also of canals back on the day, but still nowadays. So you can see here the primary canal, the secondary canals, and then some tertiary canals somewhere here, somewhere there, like just like some streams in between. So, well, this is Xochimilco nowadays, from a couple of years ago, that image. And well, what we get from the chinampas, we're almost finishing. As I mentioned, this is like the bar. It was the barn of Mexico City, but still produces a lot of things that are very traditional in the Mexican diet. Of course, corn, the staple food of Mexico, but also tomatoes, beans, the amaranth, another grain that is very, very important, squash, and nowadays is also very important for flour production. Actually, see, I think it was 2022 that we had the highest production of cempasúchil, of marigold, for Day of the Dead. They were, oh, if I remember correctly, 3 millions of plants for the pot to sell, that they were produced in Xochimilco. So, well, still a very, very important area in terms of agriculture, but it's also important now. Is becoming the people is becoming aware of the importance of consuming these local products. So different entrepreneurs are working on doing local, they call it chinampa food, local restaurants that are actually on a chinampa. So all of this that you see on this image is a chinampa. As you can see, nowadays we have huge chinampas in the place because, well, we have the techniques to do so. So Arca Tierra is one of the restaurants, one of the organizations, companies that is doing this type of events. That what they try to do is to keep like the local traditions in the local cuisine of Mexico, preserve the seeds that are found in here, native seeds. Of course, support the community because, well, it's just like an experience to go and visit the community, but you are also giving some to the community back. And one of the goals is by knowing this and experience this, city people like us can help to preserve this type of environment. So if you want to go and know more about this, check their website. It's the same, arcatierra.com. And well, it's very, very important, very interesting how they came with the idea and how they are developing this idea. Well, we're almost wrapping up. All of this going a little bit more like in deep and with more scientific and technical terms. You can find it in this video. I really like this video from a channel named Andrew Millison in YouTube. Just go to Andrew Millison and then just search in the channel chinampa, and I think it's the first second video that goes there. There are many others videos and ¿cómo se llama? News articles in other websites, but you need to look a little bit deeper with some other terms rather than only Xochimilco. Because if you just look with Xochimilco floating gardens, you're going to see the trajineras, you're going to see like the Paris side of Xochimilco, that is of course fun and important, but well, you need to go like on another type of research there. So basically that's it. I think we have some time for questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Melissa. We have a little bit of an echo. Is there anything on your side that you can change?
Let me put these things here. Just let me know if you hear me when I set them up.
Okay, thank you.
I hear you.
Okay, you can hear me now?
I hear you. Uh-huh. Can you hear me
All
without
right.
the echo?
No, I think we still have the echo.
Oh, okay.
Well, that's okay. I'll let me just ask the question.
Okay.
Can you tell us what fruits were exported to Spain? Something like cocoa or dried corn, seeds. Curious about what was exported.
What mostly what it was exported was of course corn, like maize, was exported to Spain. Some fruits that could resist a little, well, veggies that could resist more the travel, like some pumpkins or squash. Um, Maybe not the product like tomato itself, like the fruit, but maybe the plant of tomato when they were still like young, so they were able to finish their growth on their way to Spain and give the fruits once in Spain. But yeah, more than anything, those type of food that was back then easier to keep and to preserve during this long travesty on sea.
Mm. Is it possible to tour the area?
Yes, yeah, you can turn these trajineras, these boats are for tourism, and I mean it's one of the most popular touristic destinations in Mexico City. So yeah, you can tourist the area, and then luckily for us nature lovers, we have now more like ecotourism in the place. So you just need to. It's just very recent, couple of years, 5 years that it started. So you really need to look a little bit deeper on the internet. That is basically everything is available there. But we do have ecological trips in Xochimilco.
Excellent. Do you know if the chinampas are similar to the islands in Lake Titicaca?
Are similar to what?
The islands in Lake Titicaca.
Now that you ask that, could be. I didn't find any information marking similarities to that. I have seen the area of Lake Titicaca, how they were doing um their lives there, but I don't really know. That's a good question that
Yeah.
we could go deep later. Yeah, because I mean, at least on the information I saw here for the webinar, I didn't see any mention at all of Titicaca area or these cultures of South America.
Are the chinampas contributing to water conservation or other types of farming?
I think I hear you echo now.
Yeah.
Are, are chinampas what again, please?
Do they contribute to water conservation?
To water conservation. Yes. Yeah, chinampas are very important in terms of the water conservation because they capture the water like under the water level, so the root, but also above. with these trees, with the plants that we have there, of course, they are calling, let's say, the humidity to this area. And also the system of canals, the system of both natural man-made canals, um, helps or aids the conservation of the water in the area. So, for example, we can also have, they call it the recharge of the aquifer by having like all of this water in this area. So water filters down and recharges the subterranean aquifers in Mexico. So yeah, it's important for that too.
Well, thank you
Well,
again. That's the
thank you
last
again. That's the last
today. So
today.
I'll turn it
So
back to
I'll
you for
turn it back to you
comment.
for comment. Okay, thank you very much. Um, well, this is a photo I really loved and I wanted to share with you because you can see this elder man from the area of Xochimilco on one, we call this chalan or chalupa. And one of the phrases where I found the photo said Xochimilco vive. Xochimilco is alive or is still living. So all the traditions and all the ancient knowledge that we have is still working nowadays. My recommendation is that when you come to Mexico City, that you try to go to Xochimilco, but to the other side of Xochimilco, to the not so touristy party boat area. You can have two trips, maybe one for the party, one for the ecology, but just keep in mind that there is always something more that can connect us with nature as well as here in Xochimilco.
Thank you again.
Thank
And I
you
want to
again.
thank
I
everybody
want
who
to thank
tuned in.
you for tuning
Please join us
in. Join
tomorrow for our
us
next
tomorrow
daily
for
dose
our
of
next
nature.
daily dose of nature.
You can check out this week's
Check
lineup,
out this week's lineup,
including registration
including
links on our
registration links
website
on
at
our website,
nathab.com forward
nathab.com
slash
forward
webinars.
slash webinars.
With that, I'll conclude the
With that, I'll
webinar. Have
conclude
a
the
wonderful day,
webinar. Have a
everyone.
wonderful day.